He moved his parents away before my baby was born and now expects me to drive my kids to them. Imagine being 8 months pregnant, waddling around your home, trying to prepare for your first baby, sorting through tiny onesies and debating which crib to assemble, and your parents call you up not to ask how you are doing or what you need, but to casually mention that they have already started packing up their lives to follow your sister to another state. Not to be closer to the grandbaby coming in weeks. Not to support you through one of the most physically and emotionally overwhelming seasons of your adult life. To follow the child they always liked better. That is where this story starts, and trust me, it only gets more infuriating from there. This is not a case of a grown man being petty over old wounds. This is a man who watched his parents make a very loud, very clear choice, absorbed what that meant in the quiet and private way that children of all ages absorb the choices their parents make about them, and adjusted accordingly. The question is whether he went too far, or whether his parents are only now realizing what they traded away. So let us back up to the beginning and understand who these people actually are, because the dynamic here is important. Our narrator, 28 years old, spent years doing the work. He and his wife invited his parents over for dinner multiple times a month. These were not obligatory holiday appearances or last-minute check-ins. These were consistent, intentional invitations, the kind that require planning and cooking and emotional energy, the kind that say I want you in my life and I am willing to prove it with my time. He and his wife showed up in the way that most parents can only dream their adult children will show up. They made it easy and warm and regular. His sister, 5 years older and married to someone significantly older than her, lived nearby too but made almost no effort at all. She was present on paper, in the sense that she had not moved away yet, but in practice she was largely absent from the kind of consistent, warm engagement that makes a family actually feel like a family. The parents saw this dynamic clearly and their response was not to encourage the sister to show up more, to nudge her toward the kind of effort her brother was making so naturally. Their response was to excuse her completely, because she had kids and was busy. Never mind that our narrator was also an adult with a life and a job and responsibilities of his own, managing the same hours in a day that everyone else gets, choosing to spend some of them driving to his parents' house and sitting around a dinner table and asking about their weeks. The sister got a permanent pass and he got nothing but the expectation that he would keep showing up anyway, that his effort was simply what was required of him rather than something worth noticing or appreciating or reciprocating with any real warmth. That is the foundation of this story, and it matters enormously. Because what came next was not some random event. It was a continuation of a pattern that had been running for years, a pattern where his investment in the family was taken for granted and his sister's absence was absorbed without consequence. When the sister and her husband packed up and moved out of state, the parents did not sit down with their son and have a conversation about what this meant for everyone. They did not ask his wife how she was feeling about the pregnancy, whether her feet were swollen, whether she was sleeping, whether there was anything they could do in those final weeks before everything changed forever. They did not consider, even briefly, that choosing to relocate across the country while your son's wife is 8 months pregnant with your first shared grandchild might be a decision worth examining from more than one angle, worth at least one honest and uncomfortable conversation. They made their decision, got most of the way through the logistics of selling or packing or forwarding mail, and then informed him as an afterthought. His wife was pregnant with their first child. The grandchild these people are now desperate to meet was on the way, weeks from arriving into the world, and it did not factor into the calculation at all. He found out not as someone whose feelings or needs mattered but as someone who needed to be updated, the way you update a neighbor before you move rather than a son whose growing family you are choosing to leave behind without discussion. I genuinely cannot wrap my head around that. You have a grandchild coming in weeks, a tiny new person who will carry your family name and your family face, and you choose that exact moment to relocate across the country. That is not a neutral life decision made with clean hands. That is a statement about who matters and who does not, and it was delivered without apology. So he did what a lot of people who have spent years absorbing low-level rejection finally do when they have nothing left to give. He dropped the rope. That phrase means something specific. It means he stopped pulling. He stopped being the one who reached out and organized and made effort and showed up, and he just let the tension go slack. You have to understand what that moment must have felt like, the quiet, tired decision to simply stop. Not to slam a door or deliver a speech or send a long emotional message cataloging every slight from the past decade. Not to make a scene or demand an apology or give them the satisfaction of seeing how much the pattern had cost him. Just to stop extending his hand toward people who had made it clear, over and over again in small and large ways, that they were not going to meet him halfway. Not out of hatred, not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion and the quiet recognition that the effort was never going to be matched no matter how consistently he offered it. He let it go. And life moved on in the way that life does when you stop bleeding energy into a wound. He and his wife had their first child, then their second, and somewhere across the country his parents were living near the grandchildren they did prioritize, presumably getting their fill of family warmth from the daughter they always chose, watching those kids grow and change in real time, present for the ordinary Tuesday moments that are actually what a family relationship is made of and what you lose when you make choices without thinking about what you are walking away from. And then something shifted. Maybe the sister got busy with her own life in a way she had not been before and the visits became less frequent. Maybe the grandkids already there started requiring more from everyone and the novelty of the new arrangement wore thin into the ordinary friction of daily proximity and competing needs. Maybe the parents, lying awake one night, did the quiet math and felt the specific and uncomfortable weight of realizing that two grandchildren exist somewhere across the country, children who share their blood and their name. And those children have never once seen their faces. Whatever the trigger was, suddenly they are calling. Suddenly they want to know why they have never met these children, as if the answer to that question is some great mystery rather than a direct and traceable result of decisions they made with full information. Suddenly there is urgency and emotion and the language of family obligation flying around in every conversation, which is fascinating. Because where was all of that urgency and emotion when his wife was 8 months pregnant and they were busy booking moving trucks and changing their address? The calls come in and he does something I think is quietly brilliant. He does not explode. He does not answer the phone with a prepared list of grievances, working through them one by one with the energy of a man who has been rehearsing this conversation for years, waiting for his moment. He does not raise his voice or lay out the timeline or beg them to finally understand what it felt like to be the child who was never quite enough. He simply mirrors their own logic back at them, coolly and precisely, the way you hand someone a mirror and step aside so they can look without your face in the frame. You said it was understandable that my sister could not make effort when you lived 10 minutes away because she had kids. I have kids now and we are far apart. So surely it is understandable that I cannot make the effort either. He handed them their own argument, the exact justification they had offered once before on his sister's behalf, and let them sit with it, let them feel the shape of it now that it no longer served their purposes. And instead of recognizing the point, instead of pausing and feeling even one moment of genuine recognition or discomfort, they called him petty. Oh, they called him petty. Let that sink in. They told him to stop being petty and then lectured him about the importance of grandparents in children's lives, which is genuinely one of the most tone-deaf responses they could have chosen. Because he knows grandparents are important. He knows what a close family relationship looks like and what it costs to build one, because he spent years doing exactly that, showing up consistently, making space for them in his week, treating the relationship as something worth tending through effort and time and genuine care. He spent years building one with them and they walked away from it without a second thought, without a conversation, without even the dignity of pretending it was a difficult choice or that their son's growing family had been part of the equation at all. Now they want to invoke the value of family closeness as a weapon to make him feel guilty, to use the very thing he once offered them freely and consistently as a tool to shame him into compliance. That is not a conversation about family. That is a manipulation attempt dressed up in sentimental language, and the fact that they cannot see the difference, or do not want to, says everything about how much genuine self-reflection has actually happened on their end since they picked up the phone. He told them that if they cared they would make the effort, and then he stopped engaging. Good. That is the right move. Because what he recognized, even if he did not say it in those exact words, is that the people demanding access to his children have not demonstrated that they have changed at all. They are not calling to apologize. They are not acknowledging what they did when they moved away while his wife was pregnant, not sitting with the weight of that choice and what it communicated clearly to the person left behind. They are not saying we understand why you are hurt and we want to do better and we are prepared to prove that through consistent and patient action over time. They are saying stop being petty and let us see the kids. That is entitlement, not reconciliation, and the difference between those two things matters more than almost anything else in a situation like this one. Now I want to address something that some people might be thinking, which is that the children are innocent and should not be used as leverage. That is true and it is worth sitting with. These kids did not create this conflict and they deserve grandparents if grandparents are safe and loving people to have around. But here is the thing. There is no evidence yet that the grandparents have changed. Bringing young children into contact with adults who have consistently demonstrated that they play favorites and dismiss effort and show up only when it suits them is not obviously good for those children. Children are perceptive in ways adults underestimate, and they absorb the emotional texture of the relationships around them, picking up on unspoken dynamics with a sensitivity that can shape the way they understand love and worth for years to come. Grandparents are important when the relationship is healthy and consistent. They are not automatically entitled to access just because of biological connection. The other thing worth saying is that he is not the one who caused this distance. He did not move away. He did not make choices that prioritized one sibling over another for decades, building a pattern of favoritism so consistent and so rarely examined that it became its own kind of family policy everyone quietly accepted. He did not wait until after all the big decisions were made and all the boxes were packed to inform the other party as an afterthought. He is the one who was consistent, who made effort, who invited them to dinner over and over again, who treated the relationship as something worth protecting and investing in, and who was still treated as the lesser child despite all of it, despite every dinner and every visit and every attempt to close the distance that seemed to exist not in miles but in his parents' hearts. He does not owe them a shortcut back to his family now that they have decided access would be convenient. What he does owe himself, and his wife, and his kids, is a clear and honest conversation about what a relationship with his parents would actually look like going forward, and whether those people are genuinely capable of showing up differently than they have at every significant moment before. That is a conversation worth having, not because his parents deserve it, but because closing a door permanently without ever checking what is on the other side of a real apology is also a choice with long-term consequences that belong to him too. His kids might one day want to know their grandparents. He might one day want that chapter to have ended differently, to have left a window open rather than a wall. None of that means he should cave right now or meet people halfway who have not shown up at all. It just means the answer is not necessarily permanent silence either. What is absolutely clear is that the burden of effort needs to shift dramatically and stay shifted. If his parents want to meet these children, they know where to find them. They have cars and money and the same access to travel that he does. They made a deliberate choice to move away and build their lives near another set of grandchildren. They can make an equally deliberate choice to come back for a visit, to buy a plane ticket, to show up at a door and demonstrate through action what they are claiming to feel over the phone. That is the bar. It is not a high bar. It is actually the bare minimum of what effort looks like. But it is the bar, and until they clear it under their own power and without complaint, he does not owe them a single extra step. He basically moved into my apartment for free and called me a landlord when I asked him to help. She came home from a long day at work and found 3 strangers drinking beer in her living room, using her television, and ordering food through her delivery account because her boyfriend forgot his wallet. Her boyfriend, who does not technically live there. Her boyfriend, who has his work clothes in her closet and his gaming setup in her living room and his body in her bed 5 or 6 nights every single week. And when she got upset about it, he told her she was acting like a landlord. Let us talk about what is actually happening here, because this situation is more layered than a simple question about who pays for what. Our narrator is 25 years old, living alone in her own apartment, and she has been watching her living situation transform over the past year and a half in a way she never formally agreed to. It started the way it always starts, with love and comfort and wanting to be close to someone. He started spending more nights. Then most nights. Then almost every night. His things started appearing. A toothbrush. Then clothes. Then a whole gaming setup. Then his work wardrobe moved in. And somewhere in that gradual accumulation of his presence, her small apartment became a shared household in every practical sense of the word, with one very significant exception. She is the only one paying for it. The bills went up. Electricity for 2 people running gaming equipment and cooking meals and showering every day is not the same as electricity for 1 person living quietly. Water. Food. All of it increased. And she noticed, because she lives alone and she pays close attention to what things cost, because that is what you do when you are 25 and managing your own life on your own income. She noticed the numbers creeping upward month after month, that quiet financial pressure that does not announce itself all at once but wears on you gradually, the way a small leak ruins a ceiling. She kept a mental tally. She probably told herself it was fine, that love means generosity, that she did not want to be the kind of girlfriend who counted every dollar. And then she tried to talk about it, and that is where things got ugly. He told her that if he starts paying, the relationship stops feeling romantic. He used the word transactional, which is a word that people reach for when they want to make a reasonable request sound cold and calculating. Think about what it takes to say that with a straight face. To look at someone who is carrying the full financial weight of a household you both live in and tell them that asking for help would ruin the mood. But here is the thing about that argument. He is already participating in a transaction. He is just the only one benefiting from it. He gets a bed, a shower, a kitchen, a television, a utility bill, and a delivery account, all in exchange for nothing but his presence, which he frames as a gift she should be grateful for. That is not romance. That is a very comfortable arrangement for one person. And he makes more money than she does. That detail is not a small footnote. That is the most clarifying fact in the entire story. He is not avoiding contributing because he is broke or because money is tight or because he is saving towards something they both agreed on. He is avoiding contributing because he has decided, consciously or not, that this is a situation he can extract value from without being held accountable for it. He buys expensive shoes. He spends money eating out with friends. He has disposable income. He just does not spend any of it on the place where he functionally lives, sleeps, eats, and spends the majority of his evenings. I want to be clear about something. The argument that paying rent makes a relationship feel transactional is one of the most self-serving things a person can say to someone they are taking advantage of. Then came the night that really crystallized everything. Picture what that moment felt like for her. She has been on her feet all day. She is tired in the specific way that only a full shift can make you tired, and she is probably thinking about nothing except getting through her own front door and finally exhaling. Instead, she opens that door and there are 3 unfamiliar people spread across her furniture. Her beer is open on her coffee table. Her television is on and tuned to whatever they wanted to watch. And somewhere in the background, her delivery account is actively being charged for food she did not order and will not eat. Her boyfriend did not ask. He did not send a text saying, "Hey, is it all right if a few friends come over tonight?" He did not check, because it did not occur to him to check, because he has stopped experiencing her apartment as her space and started moving through it as if it belongs to him as much as it does to her. That is not a man who got too comfortable. That is a man who has stopped seeing her space as her territory and started treating it as his own, with her as a secondary occupant of the life he has quietly built inside her home. When she confronted him, he did not apologize for any of it. He did not say sorry for not asking or sorry for using your account or even sorry for not texting ahead. He attacked her framing entirely. He called her a landlord. He stood there, in her apartment, surrounded by his friends, having spent her money without asking, and he made her feel like the unreasonable one. Made her feel like noticing the problem was the problem. And then when she fired back with a sharp and completely valid retort about the free hotel situation, he shut down, withdrew, and told her she had embarrassed him in front of his friends. He flipped the entire thing so that somehow she was the one who did something wrong. He walked away from that conversation as the wounded party. That move, that pivot from being caught out to playing the victim, that is a tactic. It might not even be a fully conscious one. He may genuinely believe, in that moment, that he is the one being treated unfairly. But it is a pattern that keeps her focused on managing his feelings instead of addressing the actual problem. It keeps her off balance. It keeps her second-guessing herself. And it is working, because here she is asking the internet whether it is normal to expect someone to contribute when they basically live with you. The answer is yes. It is completely normal. It is so normal that it does not even require a question. The fact that she feels like she has to ask tells you something about what this relationship has done to her sense of her own reasonableness. Her older sister told her she has already let this go too far and he now feels entitled. That is a hard thing to hear, but it is probably the most honest assessment in the room. Because entitlement does not announce itself. It builds up quietly over time through a series of small moments where someone tests a boundary and finds there is no consequence, and then tests another one, and then another, until they have fully settled into a version of the relationship where their comfort is the priority and the other person's needs are an inconvenience to be managed. The sister has likely watched this unfold from the outside, watched her younger sibling absorb more and more without complaint, and recognized the shape of it even if she struggled to name it until now. So where does she go from here? She needs to stop approaching this as a delicate conversation about feelings and approach it as a practical conversation about facts. The fact is that he uses this apartment as his primary residence in every meaningful way. The fact is that primary residents contribute to the cost of that residence. The fact is that his income is higher than hers and his discretionary spending proves he has money available. She can set a number, a specific contribution toward utilities and food costs at minimum, and present it not as a request but as a statement of what needs to happen for this arrangement to continue. Not a negotiation about whether romance is compatible with financial responsibility. A clear and direct statement. She should not soften it. She should not apologize for bringing it up. She should say it plainly and then let the silence sit. If he responds to that by calling her a landlord again or withdrawing affection or making her feel guilty for having needs, that is the answer. That is him telling her that he is not willing to be a partner, only a guest who has decided he does not have to play by the house rules. A person who loves you and respects you does not weaponize your vulnerability against you when you ask for something fair. A person who loves you does not make you feel insane for noticing that you are being taken advantage of. A person who loves you shows up for the relationship, and showing up for a relationship includes showing up financially when the situation clearly calls for it. She asked how couples normally handle this. Normally, couples talk about money openly, make decisions together, and both contribute according to their means and their level of involvement in a shared space. What is happening in her apartment is not a couple's situation gone slightly off track. It is one person building a life in someone else's home without taking on any of the weight of it, and then using emotional language to shut down any attempt to address that imbalance. That is not a communication problem. That is a character problem. Drop a comment below telling me which story got you more heated, because I genuinely could not pick just one. And if this kind of content is your thing, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot.